Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel and come and join the PLZ family. If you want to subscribe to PLZ Premium, you'll be in the prize draw to go to the Champions League final. You and a partner, flights and accommodation thrown in. All you have to do is subscribe to PLZ Premium. Great to have your company. We're sponsored by Cameron Commercial Vehicles. If you go onto their website, you can get a quality new and used van. If you're looking for that van, then Sean's your man. He'll help you with all the details. So, lots to talk about on the programme and going through all of our main topics with BME, our main sponsor of our news. Trusty's red card stands, but Celtic are far from happy, claiming the VR decision is not consistent with the rules. We'll discuss that. We'll look at the transfers in and out at the Scottish Premiership clubs in the last few days of the window, which annoys Stephen McGowan greatly. Is Dermot Desmond getting ready to sell his shares, or is Celtic's signing strategy just an act of defiance and stupidity? We'll discuss that, as well as looking at Harry Kane. And thankfully, because Stephen is here, we were looking at some of the comical and unhinged footballers and some of the antics they've got up to over the years in Scottish football. There's more than a few that I'm sure you can think of. So there's your headlines with BME, your AI twin to take care of your business when you're out and about. Now, what about our quiz question today, sponsored by Elite Joinery and Fire Protection? It's a fairly straightforward one. It is: which top 10 goal scorer in the English Premier League has played football in Scotland? We'll give you the answer at the end of the programme. So, of the top 10 Premier League goal scorers in England, of course, at the top is Alan Shearer. Still 48 away from him is...
Want me to give you the answer?
Harry Kane. Well, no, that would absolutely ruin it for everybody on a podcast who's thinking about it and everybody who's watching the show. So, there you are. He's really the type of person that said to everybody at Christmas, listen, kids, I know that you're excited by Santa Claus, but here's
you're not going to say it now, are you?
Here's what you're getting. No.
You're not going to say it now.
Here's what you're getting. Partially, I'm not going to say it either. So anyway, there's the quiz. So good luck with that. We'll give you the answer before we get to the end. Okay, it's still rumbling on, but the resolution of the red card is quite simply Celtic appealed the Trusty red card at Tynecastle that VAR had intervened after Stephen McLean deemed it only a yellow. And they appealed and they lost that appeal. What's your immediate reaction to losing the appeal and where it stands?
I would have been amazed if they'd won the appeal. Not as any judgment of the actual incident, just because I just don't think the SFA are ever going to back down on that one.
Do they have a point on it's not consistent with the rules?
My concern with it was, I could live with a yellow or a red, Peter. I don't think it was an absolute. You know, the trouble with VAR is that people see what they want to see. Everything is subjective. It doesn't solve all the things it was supposed to solve. It creates new arguments. So if you're a Hearts fan, if you're a Rangers fan, you see that was a red card. If you're a Celtic fan, you think it was a yellow card. And we see this every week. People divided down tribal lines. VAR isn't solving this. And it's a fundamental problem with it. Now, my issue with it was, honestly, I don't think it was an absolute. I think if you give a yellow, if you give a red, that's fine because it's one of them. My issue was that once Stephen McLean gives the yellow, he has a clear view of it, he sees it. So what's changed his mind? It's almost like, I don't know why VAR is particularly getting involved in that, because to me, whatever you give, be it a yellow or a red, it's not a clear and obvious error. It just isn't. And, you know, you argue about denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. That's fine, but it's not a clear and obvious error to give a yellow card. Therefore, all you've got is, it's a bit like lawyers when you have 2 or 3 lawyers who can't agree on the interpretation of the law. We are in the same situation with referees now. Why is John Beaton's view more valid than Stephen McLean's? Why has Stephen McLean changed his mind? I repeat, yellow, red, for me that's not the issue. The issue is, why did VAR get involved here?
I agree with you 100%, because quite simply the argument now moves on to the subjectivity of, is VAR re-refereeing the game?
Absolutely.
And with that in mind, Gordon, as I've said on the football show this week, in the press box at the time when he's going through and he's taken out, I looked at it and I went, that's a red card. And you know, a couple of journalists looked at me and said, do you think so? And I went, that is a red card. The referee will send him off. When he produced a yellow, I looked and I thought, wow, I'm going to wait for VAR. I bet you VAR intervenes on this. And he intervened, and then it changed and he's sent off. Now, Martin O'Neill prompted at the end, said, we're now getting to the point where they're re-refereeing the game. But the whole argument moved on because, as Stephen rightly points out, the subjectivity is open to debate. But did VAR, and this is where Celtic's argument is, was there a clear and obvious error? And that's where they said there wasn't a clear and obvious error. He'd already deemed in his mind he's not going to get a shot away. There's a couple of players covering. Whether they're going to get there or not, in his mind they weren't. So I'm curious to see if they're going to release the audio to let us hear the conversation between John Beaton and Stephen McLean that suddenly influences him when he's seeing the pictures to change his mind.
Here's the thing, Gary Keown wrote a column a few weeks ago about one of the best title races we've had in decades. And as nightfall is day, it's going to be a VAR debacle. And here we are already talking about one of the biggest, we should have been a pivotal kind of climactic occasion at Tynecastle, and it's all about conspiracy theories again, possibilities. It wasn't a red card. Liam Scales is over on the cover. The ball is moving at an angle. He's not going to get a shot off. It isn't clear. And listen, you're re-refereeing the game again. John Beaton shouldn't get involved. The audio is going to be fascinating. But the right decision was made on the pitch. Technically. It's not up for debate. Craig Levine and Chris Boyd were both adamant it was a red card because the player was going to get a shot off. He wasn't.
In their mind, in your mind, it's something
that's
else.
the thing, Pat, we don't know that for certain. That's what I mean. There's no absolutes with this one. It could have been. It's one of these possible goal-scoring opportunity rather than definite goal-scoring opportunity, but it was an opportunity. I don't think anyone could deny that.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I'm looking at it, I'm saying to myself, because he's initially taken out and he's going directly to goal, people are analysing the position of the ball, the speed of the player, whether the other player, Labori, is going to actually get there and be quick enough to get an angle on the shot.
The trajectory of the ball has to be more straightforward. No, it has to be heading towards the penalty.
No, but no, not necessarily, Gordon. But the point I'm making here is, and what we're all talking about is, the subjectivity of it is you saying, I'm analysing it, and you're saying this is what's happening. Somebody else has got, as Stephen mentioned, from a Hearts point of view, they'll be analysing it in a different way. If that was at the other end, by the way, all hell would break loose because the biggest set of supporters.
I didn't think the SFA were going to overturn this at all but also they must have privy to that audio. They must know that it's safe ground.
I mean, the biggest point for me is VAR was supposed to stop all this. It was supposed to help us with this stuff.
Can I just intervene then? I don't think it was supposed to stop it. What it was supposed to do was increase the percentages of getting it right.
It's gone from 92 to 98%. That's good. It'll never get to 100. That's the problem. Because human error is the decisive thing here. It's still, you have technology operated by imperfect human beings who are subjective in their opinions and they're always going to disagree about it. I just think it's absurd that you have a scenario where you spend all this money on a system which has us sitting here debating the equivalent, the footballing equivalent of whether Harvey Oswald could have fired 3 bullets in 7 seconds.
Yes.
I mean, it's a forensic analysis you're talking about. Was he going away from goal? Sorry, but this is absurd.
Yeah, the other thing, I mean, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole with this, but I do think there was a second shooter. It's just my own thoughts on it. So
do I. From the manhole in Dealey Plaza, I think, I'm not sure about it behind the grassy knoll, but
yeah.
But VAR, I mean, VAR's debate on that would have been quite something. But I mean, I just think we are disappearing down a rabbit hole. I think that's the point.
Yeah. Okay, and that's next week's quiz question on the journals. Was the Zeebrugge film altered at any point by FBI agents?
Listen, Celtic's grievance is 100%. Can we agree on that?
I think they've got a legitimate case to say but this is the point. I think they've got a legitimate case to say, was it a clear and obvious error? That's the only debate here, because as Stephen points out, you've said subjectively you think there's going to be cover there, he's not going to get the shot away. Everybody can have their tuppence worth on it. That's not what Celtic are arguing. Celtic are arguing it was so subjective that the referee's decision should not have been overturned. They say VAR could not definitively say
no
that was
way
a
that's
clear
a
and
clear
obvious
and
error.
obvious
Well,
error.
that's the debate that they're
Yeah,
having.
it's like we saw one not to change too much, but when Aberdeen had a goal chalked off in that 6-2 win over Livingston, what would have been their second goal. And I think they couldn't draw decisive lines on the pitch, was it?
Yeah, and that's been the case because of the lack of the top line technology on this. We've got a limited amount.
Poundland technology.
Yeah.
And you then had a scenario where the referee, was it Ross Hardy, I think, was called over to the pitchside monitor to decide this based on, flawed lines. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, surely in that situation, the original decision of the assistant referee, the linesman, should stand.
Yeah.
Why are you calling your referee over to the monitor? It's just...
I actually think they should embrace what Arsene Wenger's been talking about, which is clear daylight between player and defender. If there's clear daylight, he's offside, fine. But if there's not, then let's start to get people entertained more by giving more goals.
I think the point
this becomes a title race where it's shoelaces. Shoelaces are determining things. Give us a break. They need to have a radical rethink now, because don't turn it into an absolute controversy fest.
Well,
But it is going to, because Stephen pointed out only 5 minutes ago, we're now into conspiracy theory territory, because quite simply, and I mentioned it on Monday, we are now at a point where there are 3 teams in the race, and now they're going to be looking at referees' backgrounds, who they supported as a boy, accusations of bias, because there's so much at stake, Stephen. We are going into the gutter with this.
It's going to be toxic. It's going to be toxic.
I'm going to throw this in.
No, hang on. We're seeing it with 2 team title races. I mean, now you've got 3 really bitter rivals. We're in new and uncharted and very unpleasant territory here. And we're just not mature enough a country to handle it.
Yeah, damning indictment on the country, to be honest with you. But listen, this is the nature of it, and I think it's going to become even murkier as we move on with it. One thing I do think, and this is the nature of the pettiness. I mean, I was at the press conference when Derek McInnes came in, and he said, "Listen, it's unusual for Celtic to get a red card domestically anyway. Wow, my God, they're all up in arms. They want him hung, drawn and quartered." Derek McInnes is perfectly within his rights, even if he's at the noise up. He's perfectly within his right to point out that Celtic very rarely get a red card domestically. It was the same when people were talking about Rangers' regularity and penalties. If the stats are there, point it out. Who cares if you're upsetting people? If the stats are there and they back it up.
100%, and I think Chris Boyd also said the same thing. I think people... This is the beginning of something, right? Yeah. And I fear for that, because I would love it not to be, but unfortunately that's...
Pantomime.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the one thing that I think annoys the life out of everybody, I used to actually, and I'm so glad I'm at the back end of it, but I used to actually have to constantly, when I was working for Radio Clyde, just constantly be phoning agents. Some of them you really didn't want to talk to. Sometimes you had to phone clubs, sometimes you had an in with a player, and I was constantly chasing stories on transfers. That was my bread and butter, or you were not getting on shows, or you weren't getting to contribute, you weren't earning any wages. And you were sometimes sitting up till midnight, heading out to somewhere because there was a late signing. It was a real pain in the butt. I know you hate it with a passion. It gets to that last bit of the window, and people are scrambling about for a player that they think can either save them from relegation or win them the league.
Everybody's after a striker. Everybody. And it's this contrived, convoluted period where there's this mad scramble to sign players. And in the 24-hour news cycle, if you're a journalist, there's no switching off. That's what you're saying there. Yeah. You're sitting trying to watch the news at 10:30 about serious issues, and you're getting messages from this guy, that guy, fans, maybe agents, maybe other journalists, saying, "What are you hearing? You hearing anything about this?" And I just be glad when it's over, because it's a kind of, there's a mania that comes over supporters. It's just an obsession, a fixation with who are the club signing.
Yeah,
and it's almost relentless, and. I think it's distracting for players, it's distracting for managers. As I say, it's wholly contrived and convoluted. It's pretty much a Sky Sports creation. And I think it's draining. And I'll be glad when it's over.
Yeah.
It's going to be decisive.
It is, absolutely, yeah, it is.
It is players' futures, and they want to obviously get them settled. It's not the best month for getting that ultimate bargain that comes in. I mean, that's the key to all of this. Sometimes it can be also, as you said, decisive by signing, but it can also be unsettling for players who think they're getting a move who are not. I mean, right now, Kieran Bowie must be sitting there at Hibs thinking, okay, Halas Verona, there might be a few others, knocked back an initial bid with add-ons, and Hibs fans are thinking, is somebody going to sign him with a day to go and we're absolutely struggling for a striker?
It's difficult. If I'm Kieran Bowie, I'm thinking to myself, what a move for me. Brilliant move. What another step forward. What impact does it have on his psyche? How is he going to deliver now in the months ahead? Because he knows he's out of joint. Because he will personally be wanting that move. The problem with this market is you don't get hot unless you're a Motherwell striker. And Celtic are prepared to go and pay the money to get him in. You're going to get guys that are out, haven't played much, that have got confidence issues, that are surplus to the requirements. The reasons for that are clear because they're cold. So where do you go and recruit? It's, unless you go and get a Raheem Sterling that's going to lift a place, but that's not feasible or practical. So, and we've only got a few days left. You're right. Shut it as quickly as possible, please, and get on with it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I thought you made a good point there, Patsy. I don't say that often. But I mean, I thought you made a good point about, actually, it does define a season, doesn't it? If you're Celtic now, where are we, 4 or 5 days to go, whatever, what happens now will dictate what happens in their season. It's not just Celtic. Hearts have made some moves, Rangers have made some moves. So the stakes are high, and that increases the pressure. And as you rightly say, what's out there isn't necessarily kind of player you want to hang your hat on to win your league.
Yeah, absolutely. But interesting, I'll touch on Celtic shortly, but I wanted to touch on the Rangers situation because, Monaco, a loan deal with the possibility of 10 million. Then Chermiti at 13 million. And, both are knocked back. Now, they could be knocked back because strategically this new group that control Rangers are, sensibly looking and thinking we're going to protect the assets at the moment because the title is on. And another way, I would look at it and say, 13 million for Chermiti. Thank you very much. I'll drive him to the airport because you'll be able to get somebody else in who actually is more lethal. So I'm looking at that one with a certain amount of scepticism and questioning. Surely that board's saying, he's not shown that he's an absolutely prolific striker. If that's a 13 million, thank you and good night.
Yeah, I get it in terms of clearly Rangers have a really good opportunity to secure automatic qualification for the Champions League. That's how big this is. If Olympiacos lose an Ajax this week, then Rangers, if they win the league, will secure qualification probably for the Champions League. And that's what, £40 million, which after all the years of losses and financial problems at Rangers, that's big. Potentially a game changer, a baton changer, in fact.
Yeah.
However, you've got bids for Gassama. Now, Gassama to me is the shining light of this Rangers team. They're very good from set pieces. Some open play are not quite so hot. He's the one guy I think could really make something happen. Pace, directness. He's a real danger. He's a threat. So I can understand why they would knock back even 5 times the money they paid for him.
Yeah.
For Monaco.
But I wouldn't be giving him a loan, would you?
No, absolutely. No, well, was it an obligation rather than a
loan with an option to buy?
An agreement to buy.
I thought it was an obligation. Well, that's key. If it's an option to buy, then you knock it back. If it's an obligation to buy, slightly different. But either way, I can understand him hanging on to Gassama. Chermiti is a slightly different case. I mean, Chermiti obviously changed perceptions of him with his 2 goals at Celtic, but I still don't think you would say he's a player you would turn down £13 million for. Because, as you said, if you get that £13 million, you can go and you can blow Celtic out of the water for Casper Hawk. Or you can go and sign Kieran Bowie for £6 million. You can pay £3 million to Motherwell, and you can still have £3.5 or £4 million left over in profit. So to me, Chermiti, if someone was offering me 13 million, hand, bite, gone.
Yes, absolutely. I'm in your camp with that. The only thing I was saying, I did suggest that, from a Celtic perspective on Mazwanisi, £3 million. And I'm glad Stephen said that because the Motherwell fans have absolutely caned me, so they'll now switch attention to him because they're saying they're on £3 million. Not a chance. They want more money.
Yeah, we watched him on Saturday. Convinces in every department.
That's what he say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the volley, speed. Admittedly, again, it's a wee bit of a what I would call the Miofsky at Rangers. I think he's better when he's running beyond a high line.
Absolutely.
And you know, rather than, you know, the Chavanchara who looks as if he can hold the ball in and he's got some good touches. He gave Celtic a completely different option.
Yeah.
I thought for a debut for a boy who hasn't kicked a ball for a while, you know, I thought he was impressive. But saying that, it brings me nicely to what we're talking about with clubs making signings that could transform their season in this 3-horse race. Again, Hearts have been on it. They probably are still looking to try and get somebody in before the end of the window, but I'm looking at Celtic and I just see catastrophe at the moment, more anger and a real roll of the dice now, to the point where I think the Celtic fans are on the verge of, you know, in their thousands, being at the gates. Ryan Stevenson mentioned in a Daily Record column, you know, they've got this sense of entitlement, which I think they have. Some of them think that, you know, they've got a God-given right to be winning the title every year. But right now, they've certainly got a God-given right to be upset with the strategy of this board, which it leaves me bemused.
I think Sunday was a reality biter. I think when they went 2-1 up, they had to win that game, even for their own belief that this would be, as night follows day, another title. This is a reality biter. They now realise. You ever been in a position where you have kind of thought that this is probably not going to happen, everything will be all right, and then realise, hang on a minute, we've got a problem here. And the problem's exposed themselves again on Sunday. And see, when you get disconnect the way Celtic have with the support on the board and all the kind of off-field toxicity, it's going to maybe unravel worse. Whereas momentum goes with Rangers, momentum's with Hearts, Motherwell are doing brilliant. The one club that's dysfunction is Celtic, and it's on the park as well as off it.
I think the thing with that as well, Gordon, is that the people say when they hear you saying, well, hang on a minute, Austin Trusty was sent off and that was unfair and that's why we didn't win the game. Well, okay, but what were our options when Trusty goes off? I mean, Kieran Tierney picks up an injury. Dane Murray, who might have a good career somewhere, I don't think it'll be at Celtic, with the best will in the world to the boy. They bring on Anthony Ralston, a right back, as a left back. And you're looking at this thinking, how can this happen to a club with 70 million in the bank? And unless they make signings fairly quickly, you're looking at the weekend game against Falkirk, and you're looking at a possible back four of Araujo. Is it Araujo you pronounce it? And you've got potentially Stephen Welsh coming back in again. You may have Liam Scales at left back, and Trusty is suspended.
Yeah.
So you might have Dane Murray or whatever and centre back again.
Yeah.
I mean, if that doesn't prompt or force Celtic to get their finger out, then you wonder what will. But they just appear to be a club who are almost run like a bank rather than a football team.
I can't work it out on the basis that, you know, you're actually starting to look and say to yourself, is there another strategy? Is there something? It can't just be an act of defiance, we'll do it our way and you can all shut up. Is there another strategy where he was like, you know, I'm trying to look at it even in a business sense, is he fattening the cow to sell his shares and make a fortune? But he's a billionaire, it doesn't matter a jot. You know, so I still think he wants to hand it over to his son, Dermot Desmond, his majority shareholding in the running of the club. But then I look at the board and I'm thinking, you've talked about the fact here that Rangers could get automatic qualification. Can you imagine they don't sign the players that they're looking for? They'll lose the league. Rangers win the league. They get automatic qualification, handed 40 million. They'll be battering down the doors. They're actually just saying, you know, it's almost as if they're motioning everybody towards the catastrophe.
Well, the window's not closed yet. So, I mean, we've got to preface and caveat everything. You don't know what may happen in final days. There's not a great sense at the moment of any massive momentum. They've still got a bit of time, maybe a bit of a pressing the panic button. But yeah, I mean, it's incomprehensible. I don't sense... I mean, Dermot Desmond's on record 2 or 3 years ago saying that even if he was offered something like three times the money for his shares, he wouldn't sell. It's an emotional attachment. It's a labour of love for him. It's almost like there's just a culture of excessive conservatism and caution financial kind of just this incredible fear of a rainy day.
Stephen.
And it's saving for a rainy day. They are bringing the rainy day on. They're actually creating it.
Peter mentions the word defiance, right? And there's an element of human nature here. I mean, there's a lot of the damage, the grievances that the board members have. Dermot Desmond probably thinks lack of gratitude from Celtic fans. There's an element of spite almost.
I think it's a dangerous road to go down to suggest he's doing it.
Is it? I think so.
Well, it could be by a year, we don't know
business.
Well, see the fact that there's even rumours that Desmond's prepared to sell his shares. That doesn't come from nowhere. I'm hearing the same thing. Now,
where are you hearing that from?
well, there's a belief it's possible, right? Which you would have thought is an impossible.
Where?
Well,
Where is the evidence for that?
Well, I mean, I think it's, you never really get evidence at our level, from a business perspective, if somebody suddenly influenced him to sell his shares. You'll never get that sense. But I only threw it in there on the basis that, rumours circulate, and I'm thinking, I can't work out the strategy. I don't think, and I think Stephen's mentioned it there, Gordon, there is a certain amount of defiance and belligerence from Dermot Desmond that he won't be told what to do by anyone, who's supporting Celtic. But I don't think he sabotages the business.
Here's a
actually
human
in
nature
control
element,
of.
right?
That's just stupidity. You don't do that.
Here's a human nature element, just the person. They've been abused, they feel abused, they feel as though the lack of gratitude's there. And the instant reaction to that is, they want what? They'll take what they're getting.
Well, I can't discount that, but what I'm looking at right now is a situation which, and I make no bones about it, I think, and I've said it before, I think the board needs to be completely freshened up. I think they need to get some people and say, listen, you've done a good job as an accountant, as a board, making the money, thank you very much. We're now going to change the board and change the strategy and freshen it up and maybe change the narrative around the ambition to try and convince fans. I'm not talking about absolutely mad spending, but a change in the ambition around the club and a fresh approach to it, because there's a real disconnect between fans and board now that I don't think can be patched up, sellotape, sticking plaster. I think they're looking for change. Now, what I don't think should happen is I don't think change should come at a cost of fans abusing people like they abused Peter Lawwell. But I do think that Peter Lawwell and the strategy over a 20-year period with that board, and now Michael Nicholson and your other man, Chris Mackay, I think that board is open to criticism because the way they've gone about their business, and I think there needs to be a freshening up.
There's also a levelling up of expectation levels here, right? And when you're going toe-to-toe with Real Madrid for 60 minutes and you're going to Bayern Munich and holding your own, I think you're feeding them an a la carte menu and they're used to that. It's what they're used to now, and it's not a daily on the menu for them as Celtic. Celtic's now domestic battles are more important than Europe, and that's a fact.
All the 20 years, the 20 years, Stephen, apart from Ange Postecoglou, this strategy, this line of excuses, you can't fool the Celtic support now. They've heard them all. It's a difficult window. We're waiting at the end. We couldn't get him. We tried to get him. We missed out on this boy. We missed out on that. And then right at the last minute, every transfer window, whether it's the summer or whether it's a January, it's last minute deals, missing out on key players because they won't spend that extra $500,000, and suddenly big players have gone from their grasp and had great careers elsewhere. And of course the other thing that they're doing at the moment, which is on the quiet, and they're not announcing it, is they're shipping out all the mistakes.
I'm going to play devil's advocate just for 1 minute. And I'm not defending, I'm just trying to see how they might think about this. Dermot Desmond's is now, 30 and a half years now. And in that period, barring the late 90s where Rangers still had a bit of a grip on it all, Celtic have been domestically very successful.
Absolutely.
They've brought in a lot of money. They've won an awful lot of trophies. They've won 13 in the last 14 league titles. So if and it goes back to the point you made, Gordon, about the comment in the Celtic Opus when he was one of his rare interviews where he said, when we win trophies, I'm not the beneficiary of praise, but when we get things wrong, I'm all the bollocks in the world.
Yeah.
And there is that feeling there. And if you're the Celtic board just sitting there thinking, you know what, we have won all these trophies. Where is the problem? The problem lies in Europe, because they have been dismal in Europe for the most part. For the most part. I mean, there was a fleeting glimpse of something better last season when you referred to Bayern Munich. And instead of building on that the way Brendan Rodgers wanted to, it's almost like they retrenched, because they saw the signings of Arne Engels and Austin Trusty and so on, and spending like something like £25 million on Adam Ida and the three of them together, and thought, oh, hang on, maybe that's not how we go. The problem is I don't see how it changes until the ownership changes. Until Dermot Desmond goes.
Yeah. Can I throw in one thing to you, Stephen? And then this is, and I think you're right to play devil's advocate, because I think we need to try and offer balance on it. The one thing I would say, when there is that stat of it's 13 out of 14 seasons where they won the league. This is a side that dominated Scottish football when Rangers were on their knees.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, Rangers weren't in the league. When they were in the league, they were certainly not financially able to even compete with them, and the rest of the clubs couldn't lay a glove on them. So, yes, they've had domestic dominance, but that domestic dominance has been against clubs that just couldn't get anywhere near them. Once they were able to get near them, because of, again, Celtic's failings at boardroom level in the COVID year when Steven Gerrard led Rangers to the title. And then again, you know, when you get to a situation where they're under real pressure now, this is because people are able to get close to them. And the Celtic fans' view is you've allowed them to get close when you kind of put them out of sight. And the other thing about it, which really grates with them, is that lack of ambition for Europe, and the narrative, which is, by the way, we can't compete.
Can I clarify? I am not saying, this is very important, the Celtic board have got it right.
No, I know where you're playing.
The point I'm making is that I think in their mindset, trying to have a look into their mindset, they'll be thinking they've done more right than they've done wrong. The problem for me is that the board is a redundant term now. There is no board. It's Dermot Desmond who runs the club. There's a man who has 34.7% of the shares and 100% of the say. And I think if you are one of those members of the board, I think really you should be thinking now, do I continue to take this abuse and this grief? And do I continue to sit on this board, not really contributing much or necessarily making a stand? Or do I actually say, hang on a minute, maybe I need to be reviewing my own situation?
But you're set for life. You're set for life. If you're part of that group, you're set for life. If you try and upset the way the strategy goes, you're a dominant.
But that would surely be the question. But the role of non-executive directors is to ask the awkward questions.
Yeah.
But the non-executive directors have been there for 18, 19 years. And it does feel as if now there's this kind of institutional mindset. So who is in that boardroom asking the awkward questions and challenging? I would suggest probably nobody.
But Stephen, the unspoken truth about Celtic is environmental. Environmental, where they can steamroll their teams week in, week out, season after season. And you're right. When the Rangers were on their knees, absolute, right above, and about 5 levels above the rest. But when they go to Europe, it's environmental. It's the quality of player that they bring in and relative to what they're facing. And you're right about talking about money in the bank, but what do Celtic fans expect? And they do expect a lot more. And was it realistic for the environment they're in?
I think the one thing Celtic fans don't want, and I've said this, and this will probably end and move on to the other points, but and I think Stephen will want to chip in this. Celtic fans have never said go out and spend 10 and 15 and 20 million on a player. Just don't keep signing seven players, one for the future that the manager hasn't signed. Stop doing that, because what's happened for it, and I say it before, for every one Yama, there's a Mo Bangura. And there's plenty Mo Banguras that they've been signing over the years that Celtic fans have looked and said, if you had gone for quality rather than quantity, the club.
Celtic for 20 million.
No, I don't think anybody. I don't think they've asked for that. They haven't.
But nobody is.
No, I've known that. But what they've said is you can sign certain players of quality, you know, instead of loading it with ones for the future. and they're getting nowhere, and they're not even contributing. I don't even know why they even brought the Simpson Pusey boy in on a loan deal. I mean, these guys are 10 up. They've got a whole list of Simpson Puseys.
The point with your £20 million player, Ripard says that they might be able to sign those players if they were willing to raise their wage bill. Now, the wage bill is quite high at the minute, but the basic fundamental Celtic weekly wage doesn't appear to have changed much in 30 years. In terms of the fact that the top earner's probably still mid-30s, you would imagine.
Yeah. Well, Kane may be the exception to that rule, right?
Is he?
Not too much above it.
He's not.
Not too much
he
above
took
it.
a huge wage cut.
Yeah, he did, but still.
He's
not massively over Callum McGregor or whatever. He took a huge sacrifice to come back.
I think the last big payer was Henrik. The last big payday is
Henrik.
Henrik.
That was then you come back to what 19 what? I mean.
Yeah, but I think his and the secondary deal that he signed, the second deal, put him onto a huge
What a wishful
bonus.
thinking taking place, because these top teams in Europe operate in a different world.
No, I know, but nobody's asking them to sign the top players, Gordon.
I'm telling you that I don't know anybody that's actually worth 20 million that would come to Celtic. Right?
No, but I'm not saying that. And not one Celtic fan. I think you're missing the point. You're not one Celtic fan is saying go out and buy a £20 million player. What they're saying is there are players out there that they could have bought rather than buying 1.2 million. Free loan deal,
argument, right?
Shin Yamada.
No argument. They've recruited appallingly, right, over a long period of time. But it's what you're paying for. You're taking gambles because you're not.
No, but a lot of the problems just now, I think, were caused by two disastrous appointments. The first one was Paul Tisdale as head of football operations, and for what we're led to believe, that was on Dermot Desmond. Paul Tisdale then pushes hard for Wilfred Nancy to come in. I mean, short of giving those two guys a can of petrol and a box of Swan Vestas, it's hard to see how they could have done more damage.
Yeah.
Now, we look now, Simpson Pussy you mentioned, and you look at Shin Yamada, who's gone to a German regional second division team. You look at Inamura, who's gone back on loan. You look, I mean, even the success stories, Benjamin Nygren has scored 12 goals, is equal top scorer in the Premiership. Is he going to dominate the midfield in games like Sunday? No, he's not. You know, Kieran Tierney's been okay, but by and large, that window was catastrophic. The appointment of Wilfred Nancy was catastrophic. A club which is so sure-footed and so well run and making good decisions for so long just appears to have made a lot of bad decisions in short order, and are now catching up and trying to recover from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us your thoughts on it. You might disagree, you might take the board's stance on it. We've got to try and get balance on this, and I think Stephen was right to offer you know, what the board might be thinking on their conduct, on their performance over a 20-year period. And for the benefit of anyone who's under the age of 30 possibly, Swan Vestas is a box of matches. Just thought I'd clarify that.
They still sell them, do they not?
If they do, I don't think many kids are buying them. So I just thought I'm trying to keep that other generation on.
Other choices are available. It doesn't have to be Swan Vestas.
Absolutely. Now, from that, we talked about it earlier on in the week, but I think, you know, over the last couple of days, again, the story has, you know, not so much gathered pace, but I think people have offered their tuppence worth on where does it go for the McQueen family, who are part of a whole number of families who've been affected by, you know, players in later life, Alzheimer's, dementia, CTE, for other medical terms, on the disintegration of cognitive skills that players suffer from heading the ball. And I think the McQueen family, Anna and Hayley, on behalf of the family, have really taken the fight to people to acknowledge that Gordon McQueen's demise was heading the ball on a regular basis, had an impact on him in later life. What I think the big question was is, what are they looking to get out of it? Is it support for the families to try and cover the costs? Is it also to try and put safety guards in place, not to stop heading the ball? I think Hayley McQueen was right to point that out. So we're not advocating stopping heading the ball. We're talking about safety measures in place for the regularity at younger ages. You know, and if there are other issues that can lessen the chance of families having to deal with that in later life, then by all means let's look at it. But I think they were very critical in the last 24 hours of reading the Daily Mail as well, talking about, I think it was Ian Herbert, talking about the fact that there's been no real backing or somebody standing alongside Hayley and Anna from the PFA from the FA. And I think that in itself, I've spoken to John Stiles with Nobby Stiles. Chris Sutton's been there. The Assel family have all taken up the baton and tried to emphasise the need for help in this. It's a demoralising disease, and I don't know where they're going to get the support, because quite simply, clubs are not willing to turn around and say, well,
yeah, PFA have taken a lot of criticism from this. They do put a fund up, but I think there's a feeling it's a bit inadequate. I mean, they're funding, and I spoke the other week to Professor Craig Ritchie of University of St Andrews, who's a brain science expert, front runner with Willie Stewart, and he's running a project called Brain Hope, which gets 120 former rugby and football players and tracks them and monitors their health and tries to see if, between the ages, I think, 40 and 59, and tries to see whether there's things they can do with them to minimise the risk of them becoming the next Billy McNeil or Gordon McQueen or Ali McLeod, and the list is growing and growing, and it's tragic. So they're trying to look at ways of preventing the situation becoming exacerbated before death, because quite often you only hear about these situations when it's too late. So they want to look at these ex-players who are about 40 and say, is there something we can do in your lifestyle to help you and prevent this happening? But the response to the game, to go back to the original point, is pretty woeful.
They're terrified.
I mean, in fact, yeah, because it could open up a class action or whatever. As with everything in football, everything comes down to money, and they're terrified.
Stephen, there's a rule just now that is, you're not allowed to head the ball on a Friday. Right? I mean, that's now become an obsolete rule. I think if you get monitored that and you went round to investigate how many clubs are actually up sticking to that, I would be shocked.
I know.
There's a terror within the game that asbestosis, kind of industrial injury things, come into play because there's no pot. There's no pot for them to fill that. All football players are concerned about it. Older football players. It's become a frequent topic of conversation.
Is it fair? And again, to offer the balance here, is it fair for the clubs to be held accountable to try and come up with a pot of money, a safety net, PFA as well with the money they make? There's not a lot of money in Scotland, PFA, and around Europe possibly there are other countries where their players' associations do not have a huge pot. Is it fair to ask them, you have to be accountable for players in later life? Because all I'm looking at right now is, yes, I think Haley and Anna have to be commended, and other families for taking the fight and keeping the fight going. But all that will happen is, quite simply, the football clubs will say, right, if our back's against the wall, here's the contract, there's a waiver in there, you know the risks. If you get into an F1 car and it's doing 130 mile an hour on a bend, you know the risks.
It has to
sign the contract.
Because clubs have medical science has shown the damage that can be done. The obligation now falls on clubs. Now, Haley's saying don't take heading out of the game. But I've been in training sessions where goalkeepers are launching balls and guys are going to attack it, and it's going on for half an hour. The damage players that have had to suffer that must be panicking and thinking, is this coming for me? It's a governmental issue to actually tell you about it.
It is.
If the Scottish economy, if football's worth 850 million to it, government has to then take care of the risk levels which are being emphasised by the individual.
Where does it stop?
Well, it stops.
Where does it stop?
Has to start.
No, where does the support network stop for someone who's doing a difficult job, who is in a manual job, who's not playing sport? Where does the support stop when somebody picks up an injury because of the job they're doing? We're talking about the miners. We're talking about them when they suddenly developed cancers in later life. We're talking about other people in other careers who basically maybe surrounded by asbestos. Who's providing the support for them and their families in later life? Where does it stop from football to other?
Yeah, football's a game swimming in money, certainly in England. And that goes into perception, doesn't it? I mean, the UK government are taking a close interest in this. You mentioned John Stiles, the Families for Justice campaign. They're speaking to Lisa and Andy. They're speaking to the UK government, and it looks like it's been taken seriously now. And there are families out there of ex-players who are being left to sell houses, to look for care costs from somewhere Listen, this is a problem for society at large, not just football.
That's my point.
Yeah, everybody's coming up against it. But the point is that football is making players 3 times more likely to sustain these injuries. So that's where football has an obligation. When I did a piece with Andy Payton, the former Celtic striker, who's got early onset dementia, I think at the age of 57. And he's with Dean Windass. He was talking about their days, I think, at Hull City or Burnley. And he said when they were training, it would basically be balls being fired in by a winger, and he would attack it 200 times in every training session. Head. I mean, that's got to be industrial damage. So football has to take its responsibility as to meet its obligations. And if it doesn't, then I suspect, as always with this situation, the politicians will step in and do it for them.
At what level does it stop the support?
I think there has to be some kind of fund, some adequate fund that just helps families who are afflicted by this.
At every level of the professional game?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah?
Why not?
I can't see that happening just from a financial point of view.
Model.
It doesn't. I don't see it. But I listen, I commend them, and I say take the fight, keep the fight going. I'm only here to say here are the obstacles that I see.
Oh, absolutely.
Being
I
put
mean, listen, we are sitting
here.
here kind of riffing on this, and we don't know the financial ins and outs. You're absolutely, if you're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds, that's clearly a problem. But football can't run away from its responsibility in this.
Yeah, the problem is, though, it's like everything else, be it football, industrial, whatever work it is, prove it. Prove it is always a massive.
And that's the long road ahead. I think there's certainly medical proof that, as Stephen mentioned, they are 3 times more likely, but obviously I think the biggest problem is arguing with lawyers to work out, well, wait a minute, who's paying, who's het for this? Okay, it's a difficult subject, but one that on the journals we like to talk about in greater detail. If you've got any points on that, by all means in the comments section, we'd love to hear from you. We like to talk about football, the negatives and the positives as well. I was reading something in one of the tabloids today about Paul Gascoigne, who said he almost cracked his skull falling off the Duke of Wellington in Royal Exchange Square. I've been in a younger time when I maybe had a sherbet or two. I've always walked past that in Royal Exchange Square and never thought I'm going to climb it. And I see the cone up there and I'm thinking, I always thought to myself, Stephen, well done the guy who's gone up there or the girl who's gone up there and decided to put the cone back on.
Yeah.
But I've never thought I'm going to go up there. Gaza, on the other hand, has to go into training on the Monday, and Walter's already seen the CCTV. So, I mean, it's just one of those laughable ones with probably one of the most gifted players ever to grace our shores. Madness. And it reminds me of the thing that, a couple of things that he did which were absolutely, hilarious. And he had so many pranks that even Ali McCoy's, when we play 6-a-side, he could tell you a million and one of them. Putting a fish in Gordon Jury's car, not one but 2, so that he couldn't find the second one. That takes a bit of thought. And then, of course, the other one was when he came in with a fishing rod and the bag and said to Ian Durrant, I bet you can't guess how many fish I have in the bag, and if you can, I'll give you all 3 of them. To which Durrant replies, 2. So I think, just absolutely lovable. But there's been a few. We had Chick Charlie on one day and he says, did you know we're at training for Partick Thistle? And there's a guy chasing us with a sword.
Him and Gordon Ray, yeah. I did a book in this kind of Mavericks of Scottish football for 4 geniuses back in 2009, did chapters on all these guys. And I remember I went up to see Walter Smith, late great Walter, up at Murray Park, and sat in his office and we spoke about Gaza, and he was incredibly helpful about the story of signing him. And what he said was that when you have a genius like Gascoigne, you have to manage the madness. You live with it. Normally the rule of football is that the mad players have to live with the team. He said, well, you've got a guy who's that talented. No, universals. Billy Connolly said that to him. He says, you live with him, he doesn't live with you, because he's worth it for what he brings to the team. Unfortunately, you get to the point where after 2.5 seasons, I think it was, there's no one that taps him on the shoulder and says, right, Gaza's time's up, he's got to go now. So they kind of tried to muddle through, and it kind of undermined their bid for 10 in a row. But Scottish football's always loved these players, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've always fitted in. Andy Ritchie, Gascoigne, Chick Charnley with the samurai sword up at Ruckhill Park. The great Willie Hamilton of Hibs and Hearts. You look at the three amigos at Celtic, Andy Gorham. I mean, they've always fitted in well in Scottish football because we like that kind of character.
Yeah, Di Canio springs to mind as well. Obviously, you know, on the park, going crazy, and I think he picked the wrong guy when he decided to have a wee go at Ian Ferguson and said, "I'll meet you after the game off the park," which I don't think Paulo was too keen on. You love a good noise. I mean, Paulo Di Canio shoving the referee. I don't know why I always remember. Everybody remembers Paul Alcock, the name of the referee, because of the lunacy of Di Canio shoving him.
Yes, you know? Yes. There was also the story about Di Canio, who would room with teammates and who would go in the toilet and come back out with nothing but a sock covering his...
Yeah, manhood.
Yes. So, he was an unpredictable character. And I remember Peter McLean, a former Celtic PR man, tell me once, he was a huge opera fan, Paolo Di Canio. Unexpected.
Yes.
And he got tickets for Scottish opera. And this kind of cocky, arrogant guy went along to the opera, and was an opera star. I can't remember the fellow's name, not my circle. But Di Canio was a simpering, cowering wreck. He was a nervous wreck because he was meeting this opera star.
We've got a mutual friend that used to cut his hair when he was in Glasgow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he would want his hair cut to the hair. He said he's a Venus, Michael cut his hair. And he said it was a brilliant guy, but the vainest person he's ever met. And this is a hairdresser that cuts a lot of hair.
Yeah.
He said he wanted his hair cut to the so specific, and the vanity was pouring out of him.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to be that way to be the kind of person he was to play with.
And you've undoubtedly played alongside a few mavericks and a few people who are, I say unhinged, tongue in cheek, because it gives footballers love a laugh in the dressing room and on the park.
One of the best stories is an Andy McLaren story. And Andy McLaren at Tannadice, all the boys that were misbehaving in Jim McLean's eyes get sent into the gym, which is under his office, to paint, whitewash the walls. You heard this story?
Oh, sure.
And we were all in the gym, and John O'Neill, I think it was, John O'Neill's got the brush, and he's written on the wall of the gym, Jim McLean is a...
An expletive.
Paul Sturrock sticks his head into the gym and looks, and it's all up there. And he shouts, boss, come down and see this. And Jim McLean comes into the gym. We're all standing there. Jim McLean is a... And it's that kind of stuff. It was hilarious, right? We all get fined. Everybody get fined routinely, but this was a major fine. But it's that kind of comedy, that kind of dark humour. The consequences were massive. But subsequently now we can talk about it and have a laugh. Yeah,
absolutely. I think somebody said to us, Duncan Ferguson, who was also one of those classic pranksters. He was one of the Dundee United players. Said he was the only player that could get away with noising Jim McLean up. And on a Monday morning he came in looking slightly the worse for wear, and McLean shouted, "Boozing, womanising," and Duncan Ferguson says, "You as well, boss."
I played with a guy who did an unspeakable thing in a dressing room, a teammate of mine. And in the afternoon of that day, the teammate phoned me and was talking about it, and he was wanting revenge. I said, "What are you going to do?" He says, "Watch this space." And he came in the following day, did an unmentionable in the guy's car.
Yeah.
Well, the boy was out training, and we all got back in after the game, and we were all looking out the windows as the guy walked towards his car. And the player walked towards his car, and you could see him. It was like a Fawlty Towers moment in the phone box. He's standing, opens the door, and he sees an unmentionable on the seat.
Yeah.
And he's gone like that, and he turns around and walks back into reception. And I said, "Ian, are you all right?" He says, "No, I'm not all right." I says, "Hey, what's up?" He says, "Some dirty bee has just done a bee in my car." I says, "And what's the matter with that?" He says, "It's no my car, it's my mum's."
Yeah, gone are the days of just cutting a hole in somebody's sock. Thanks for that story, Parsi. Listen, footballers, we love talking about all the good things in the game, and we've been waxing lyrical. We certainly enjoyed Saturday watching Motherwell, watching players that can lighten up the game. One of the things that I've tried to pick up on social media constantly and just following him is Harry Kane. Because, you know, world class as a striker doesn't actually do him, you know, the full compliment, because he's more than just a striker. He can play off as a number 10 as well, and he frequently does in Germany. And I think they're fairly relaxed about it now. I'm not sure he's got a real grasp on the language, but he certainly embraced Germany. 119 goals in 126 games. He's about to sign a new contract. I don't think the desire to come back to the Premier League to break Alan Shearer's record is there. I think he wants to go and try and break more records in the Bundesliga. He's phenomenal. I think, you know, for me, with the rest of that young ensemble, they've got a real chance of winning the World Cup with him.
Yeah, it's funny, I was just when you mentioned it there, and I was thinking back, and people talk about the goals, and understandable, he's a magnificent goal scorer, but I remember being in Qatar for the last World Cup and quarter-final against France. I remember being there that night, and Harry Kane single-handedly took England by the scruff of the neck that night, you know. Irrespective of the result and the outcome, he was... And he almost played that World Cup sometimes as a number 10.
Yeah.
Or an out-and-out number 9. He was doing a number 9 and a number 10 job. Just a terrific football player. And I really love the fact that his horizons span beyond the English Premiership. I was reading quotes yesterday from the coach of Villarreal. He was talking about the best Spanish players don't stay in Spain anymore. They go to England as soon as they can. You look at how many English clubs are monopolising the top 8 of the Champions League. English football is devouring the European game. But Harry Kane's actually said, well, hang on a minute, I want to try something else. He'd done it all at Spurs, or won trophies, of course. Decided to go and do that at Bayern Munich. And I love the fact that he's been big enough to go and do something different and make a success of it.
He's also got a skill set that very few have got. He's back to goal play. It's
Absolutely.
for me the best in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He uses his body in a different way. Anybody watching him play can learn so much. But it's the cleanliness. It's so clean these finishes.
Isn't it amazing though in our group that even in Germany some people are looking to try and pick holes in him, you know, for maybe scoring against lesser sides. And I'm looking, he's chasing Lewandowski's record of 41 goals in a season. He's got 21 after 19 matches. And we've got 15 games left. But he scored 26 goals in 32 Champions League games as well. So he's banging them in against any opposition.
Also the variety, how many headers, how many volleys, how many left foot, right foot. How do you cope? Because usually there's always a flaw. I don't see the flaw with him. How do you combat the flaw?
Yeah.
Get him on his weak side. He's effective in every department.
And yeah, I bet you any money that if you put something out on X or whatever social media at the moment, saying what you're saying, you'd get a load of replies coming back saying, he's only playing in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely, you would. And the one thing I would say to you that's how good he is, you know, some of his passing is dropping off as a number 10 is unbelievable as well. But the reason why I think he's so, you know, as well as all the skill set that he's got, I actually think he could sign another deal at Bayern Munich and then come back into his late 30s and break Alan Shearer's record here in the Premier League. He's that good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, he is. You know, I'm going down tomorrow actually to see the great Joe Jordan down in Bristol. Talk about Gordon McQueen actually, which we mentioned him before. But you know, he went to AC Milan late in his career, had a couple of good years where he got relegated and came back, joined Southampton, could have joined Celtic at the time. And there's always an English club who'll take a player like that back from overseas and give them a one last crack at it. And Harry Kane will be in big demand. The world will be his oyster. And you know, the nonsense is that you look at the Champions League statistics, they speak for themselves. You know, you may have English observers saying it's only the Bundesliga, it's not as good as the English Premier League. The Champions League stats are fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Love talking about great footballers as well on the programme. Hopefully you've enjoyed the journos. There's been a few hot topics that will get you wanting to comment. We did have a question at the top of the programme from Elite Joinery and Fire Protection, our sponsors of the quiz, which is which player who's in the top 10 of Premier League goal scorers in England also played in Scotland. You might as well have. Can we give him his moment of glory? Fire away.
His first name Robbie?
No.
First name Ian?
Eh?
Ian?
No.
So I was sitting here for a whole hour, you've been waiting for your moment of spotlight.
You give it then.
I didn't claim to know it. What's the question again? Give me the question again.
Well, the question was, which player is in the top 10 English Premier League goal scorers of all time and also played football in Scotland.
Ian Wright.
So here's
No.
Did you say Ian Wright? Sorry.
Alan Shearer's 1, Harry Kane's 2, Wayne Rooney's 3, Mo Salah's 4, Andy Cole's 5, Sergio Aguero's 6, Frank Lampard is 7, Thierry Henry's 8, Robbie Fowler's 9, and Jermaine Defoe is 10.
Oh, that's a good one.
So
Hang on a minute, I said Robbie.
Robbie who?
I've been named Jermaine.
Who did Robbie Fowler
Robbie Fowler play in Scotland.
Does Robbie Fowler not have a loan spell for about 2 weeks? I'm sure about that.
Clutching his straws.
Absolutely, you listen to the question.
What's the answer?
The answer is Jermaine Defoe. He played for Rangers. Have you met Stephen? He works in the same industry.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay. Thank you to you for joining us in the show. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. And thank you to so many of you for downloading the podcast as well, and all the compliments that you offer to us. From Stephen McGowan, from Gordon Patterson, from myself, Peter Martin, thank you for listening and watching.